Hello and welcome back to Hobby Vomit. So this is going to be our weekly retch. I am clearly not Matt. Matt is out of town right now with family, so I'm going to be filling in. I'm Ian, and I'm really excited to be doing this with you. So we're going to keep the format mostly the same, but I'm going to have a few additions. The first addition is I'm going to actually add TV shows into our movies category, and our second is I'm going to add games into, or video games rather, into our games category. So Matt and I have a lot of similar interests, but we tend to mirror each other in certain ways. So I actually tend to watch more shows than I do movies, whereas Matt's the opposite. Although I think for Matt, books kind of eat up all of his TV show time because he reads a lot more books than I do too. And then in terms of games, I play a lot more video games than I do board games. And Matt tends to be the opposite in that category as well. Although we do consistently play multiple video games every week together. So that's been a really fun time. So that's going to be the changes, but I think it's going to be a really great time, and I'm very excited to share all this with you. It's been a phenomenal week. Now, before I do, I want to go ahead and mention that I got a new microphone. I was able to do our Primal Challenge last week, but after listening to the audio back, I became very painfully aware of the fact that my mic is dying. So not good. Now, partly on me, I do have a bad track record with Yeti mics, but that's not helped by the fact that it's a desk mic and I've got some crazy kids who will just pull that off my desk. It's hitting the floor a couple times. So it just is not in good shape. That audio, I did nothing to it. It was just the raw audio coming off the mic, all the right settings, the right angles. And yeah, so it needed to go. So we got a new mic. Really excited about that. You're going to be test driving it with me. So hopefully the audio is a lot better. It sounded good when I was doing some other stuff before. So I'm excited for that. It's also on a boom arm. So hopefully that means the kids don't get to rip it off my desk now, but we'll see. Okay. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into our weekly retch, starting with books. So I'm currently doing 2 books right now. I am listening to Mistborn on Audible, and I'm reading Leviathan's Wake. So I'm going to start with the latter. I typically, as a kind of a wind down, will just pick up a Leviathan's Wake or a book and just read, get my eyes off of a screen, and just kind of help myself get prepared for sleep, right? So Leviathan's Wake, if you didn't know, is kind of the first in a trilogy that's actually the source material for The Expanse. Now, I'm a huge fan of The Expanse. I have probably watched The Expanse, I think, 3 or 4 times all the way through. I really enjoy that show. It's one of my favorite sci-fi shows. So it was time, right? Like, I've watched that show that many times and not read the book. That's crazy. So we're actually reading the books now. So Leviathan's Wake has been great. It's kind of told in a noir from different perspectives, and it's in space, and it kind of takes a different approach than sci-fi, which I really like. I can get kind of tired of the sort of space opera or space punk, whereas this one is a lot more like an explorer survival, but in space, right? You could just replace a lot of the elements with like sailors at sea trying to survive the dangerous conditions. And it has a lot of that same archetype like in its telling as well, which I think is really cool. And I think The Expanse, the show, did it great. But seeing that in the book too, and with the noir, and also just getting to see, some of the things that were true in the original material from the author is also really cool. I'm kind of someone who tends to see the shows or the movies before I read the book, which I actually like because when I do that, I tend to be very excited about reading the book because I get to see the original material from the author. And there's always that like, ooh, the author probably did it different though, and they changed it for the movie. So let's see what was original. Whereas when I go the other way, I tend to be kind of critical, like, oh, they cut this part out. Oh, they rushed that part. And so I don't enjoy the movie or show as much as I would have if I hadn't read the book. At least that's kind of been my experience. And I'm sure mileage may differ there. But I've been really excited to go through that one. Heavily recommend Leviathan's Wake, especially if you're interested in kind of a different take on sci-fi or if you're more interested in noir. I think it's been a really enjoyable read for me. The other one I'm doing is I'm listening to Mistborn. Obviously, that's a Sanderson book, and Sanderson's really popular, especially in the fantasy genre. I've not read much of his material, so this is kind of really an introduction to Sanderson for me. I was a huge fantasy nerd, still am. I do D&D and I do Daggerheart and I play a bunch of fantasy games. So yeah, definitely a huge fantasy nerd, but Sanderson just wasn't my fantasy go-to when I was going through high school and college. I tended to be a big Tolkien nerd. I tended to read a lot of Lewis. I tended to kind of go for more of like the Redwall series. Like this was kind of like my fantasy, or like Ranger's Apprentice. That's just kind of like what I read. Those were the books that I fell into. And that was pretty much dictated by what was in my school library. I mean, if we're being honest. So I just gathered whatever big books were there, and that wasn't Sanderson for me. So I just never really found them. But got, a few friends who are huge Sanderson fans. Hopefully you'll hear from them on this channel in the future. And so they were like, hey, you're really encouraging me to check out Mistborn. So I decided to give it a go. For me, I don't mean this as a critique of Sanderson, but I find Sanderson material to be a pretty easy read. So I have a 35-minute commute to work and back. And so I was like, hey, let's just get it on Audible and listen to it. This will be super nice in the morning and on the way back. I can just get on the highway and let Sanderson do his thing. So I've actually been really, really enjoying Mistborn. I think I have a huge appreciation for how Sanderson builds, kind of like intermingles his magic systems with his religion, with his like geopolitics. I think that he has a really, really cool take on how like the magic system works in his world. I don't want to give too many spoilers, right? They call it allomancy in the book, so I don't think that's spoiling anything. But if you've not checked it out, I definitely think it's a great fantasy novel. I think it's well worth reading, at least to see if you like it. I'm certainly going to try a few more after this, just to kind of see how I really feel about Sanderson. But so far, I'm enjoying it. I don't think it's the most complicated read I've done. I don't think that it's the most like original take on fantasy, although that's not really fair because this is not a new fantasy book. This is a much older fantasy book. But I think that's a good read, and I think he's got some good ideas. I certainly, and again, not to be harsh on other authors, but I really appreciate, pivoting here, George R.R. Martin's take on geopolitics. I think that he just did a phenomenal job with geopolitics in his books, even better than Sanderson. But I just did not like at all how George R.R. Martin does religion. I thought it was super bland. I thought it was super uninspired. I didn't think it was good at all. It just felt like he included it because he felt like he had to, because it wouldn't make sense for people to not have a religion. But I think Sanderson, the way that he does it is much more fascinating. Not in all respects, but certainly with the core religion that's weaved through the Empire and the way that it's intermingled with history, prophecy, magic. I think he's doing a much better job of bringing religion into the book and making it feel like a real life thing of the fantasy. And so I feel in some ways like more immersed. There are certain scenes, I would say, where it was kind of immersion breaking and I kind of zoned out even though I was listening to it. But I have been enjoying it so far. And honestly, again, not as really a critique of Sanderson, because I think this is just for me. The parts where I'm zoning out are mostly just the combat, like when people get into fights. It's just like there's some cool stuff that they can do with their magic system, but ultimately, like, I don't think that's where Sanderson's strength is. I think the stuff that's happening around that is much more interesting. I think what the fights are for, like what goal they're serving, I think is far more interesting than the actual like content in the fight. So those are kind of the parts where I've been zoning out. So if you like fantasy and you want to get a good introduction to a heavily published, still publishing fantasy author, and you don't mind trying out like a large fantasy universe, then I think Mistborn is definitely a good one to try. It will leave an opening for you to really keep reading in that universe. So I wouldn't put him as my best fantasy author, certainly not my worst. But if I was, if I was like new to fantasy, if I was just looking for another good fantasy book, or frankly, again, this is not a critique. That's not what it means. I'm like, if I was 14 or even 12, like pick it up. I mean, I really kind of wish that Mistborn was my introduction to fantasy. I think it would have been a phenomenal introduction to fantasy for me. So there's that. So those are the books I've been reading. Really excited. I should finish Mistborn in a week, and I should finish Leviathan's Wake in maybe 2 weeks, we'll see. Maybe that gets flipped around depending on how much I devote time to one or the other. And with that, let's go to our next section. Our next section is going to be on movies and shows. So as I mentioned, I tend to watch a lot more shows than I do movies. So let's go ahead and get the movies knocked out. We have not watched any movies this week, unless you count the extended edition of The Hateful Eight, which is a 4-parter. Now I've watched the non-extended cut of The Hateful Eight before, and the first time I watched it, I really enjoyed it. I think it is a hard watch, but I did really enjoy it. I've always been a big fan of Quentin Tarantino. Not seen all of his films, but Pulp Fiction was my introduction. And then, funny enough, I didn't see another Quentin Tarantino film until Inglourious Bastards, but that's when I fell in love with Quentin Tarantino films. I think Inglourious Bastards is still my favorite Quentin Tarantino. I can just watch that again and again, and I never get tired of it. The opening scene just hooked me. It was so good, and Christoph Waltz, man, it's just he did so good in that one. But I'm gonna talk about that one. I'm talking about Hateful Eight. So the first time I watched Hateful Eight, I thought it was a phenomenal movie. I think the extended edition does it so much more justice than the original movie that I watched. I was really happy to actually see the extended cut here. Again, I think it's a really hard watch. You have to be prepared not only for a Quentin Tarantino movie, but for extra on top of that. Now, part of the reason why I really enjoy Hateful Eight, and I think that if you're maybe not a Quentin Tarantino fan, or maybe you haven't watched his stuff, or maybe you just want something different, I think a good reason to watch this one is because there is not another Quentin Tarantino film like it. Okay. Because this Quentin Tarantino film is actually much closer to a whodunit than it is to any of the other work that he's done. And I think that that's really cool. I mean, it's kind of a singular film in that way for Tarantino, and I'm all for it because I'm a huge fan of murder mysteries and whodunit. And this is basically like watching if Quentin Tarantino was the one who wrote and produced Clue, like the movie Clue. That's like what this would be. And so now if you don't like the movie Clue, or if you think it's cheesy, this is obviously not a satire. So there is that element which is missing. So if you thought Clue was cheesy, you're not going to find this cheesy. It's definitely a really good film to watch. Again, it's a really hard watch. There is sensitive content in here that is even more extreme for Quentin Tarantino. I mean, it's got like the blood and the gore for sure, which is pretty classic with Quentin Tarantino. If it's white, you got to paint it red, and they're in the middle of a blizzard. So, a lot of things are going to get painted red. But there's other material that involves things like rape. So there is that. So you just be prepared for some of that heavier material. But the actors in the film, I mean, they just do a phenomenal job. It's a great cast. You'll recognize many of them from other movies, popular shows, or just from Quentin Tarantino, right? I mean, Kurt Russell, Samuel L. Jackson, all did a phenomenal job. And I think that it if you pay attention to the subtlety of the film as well, it opens a lot of questions for you right off the bat and very much establish itself as a whodunit. So like the classic example of this would be, again, not spoiling, is it's called The Hateful Eight, but your first major scene has 9 people in it. So what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen in this film? You're like, wait, hold on. It's Hateful Eight. There are 9 people. So how are we getting down from 9 people to 8 people? They're all locked into a cabin in a blizzard. Seems like we're going to get a pretty bad case of cabin fever. So again, heavily recommend that one, but just be prepared for what you're getting into. For some people, it is a bit harsh, and so they just don't really like it, even if they like other Quentin Tarantinos. But certainly for me, I think it's like certainly a top 3, but it may be a number 2 for me. I could not watch it again and again. Even I had to stop it on some of the harsh parts, but again, like kind of a top 3 for me in terms of a film. Other shows I've been watching, keep in mind, I do like to watch some B and C rated material. But before we get into that, Andor. Just did my second watch of Andor in preparation of season 2. This is my wife's first watch. Now, I'm a big Star Wars fan, not as big as some. My brother-in-law, for example, is a huge Star Wars fan. This is my brother-in-law who married my sister, because I got 3 brothers-in-law. Brothers-in-laws? No, just one law, 3 brothers. So He's a huge Star Wars fan. I'm not as big of a Star Wars fan by far. But when Andor first came out, I saw a lot of people who were saying they didn't like Andor because it didn't have like famous or popular or well-recognized Star Wars characters. I'm like, okay, we are done with that. We don't need that. Disney is going to milk that dry. Please give me something different. And Andor is something different. Again, not to like throw shade at Disney, but one of the things that makes it different is that it's phenomenally good. But like the thing about Andor is that it's a great show that happens to be set in a Star Wars universe. And that's the thing that I love about it. It's not trying to be a great Star Wars show. It is a great show that's taking place in the Star Wars universe. And that's already pretty awesome. The second thing that's really awesome is just the way that they structured the show. It actually follows kind of a 3-act structure and does it very well. And it does such a good job of just weaving everything together from part to part, where by the time you get to the end of the show, you're still being clued into things that started at the beginning of the show. You feel like there's a seamless narrative, and you feel like you as an audience member, as a viewer, are being pulled into that narrative and being rewarded for taking an interest in the things that are going on. It does a great job of weaving geopolitics, which in this case is like space, universal politics, galactic politics, right? And it does a great job of just focusing on the central character and how their actions have consequences and the change in their character. And you get such an awesome contrast from the end of like part 1 to the end of part 3. That's so rewarding for the show. It's just like again and again and again, I am so impressed with how well they did that show, that if you've not seen it because maybe you're a little tired of Star Wars or maybe you're not interested, just go watch it. You also don't even need to know anything about Star Wars, which is crazy. Someone could probably give you like a 1 minute on like what you need to know about Star Wars. And frankly, it's a little bit easier than that. Just like there's a Death Star in the first movie that can destroy planets, and the Empire uses that to assert authority, like tyranny, over the entire galaxy. And Andor is the start of the rebellion that fights against that. There you go. You're good. Go watch Andor. It's great. So I was super happy to watch that for my second watch through. My wife, again, absolutely loved it. By the way, when we got married, she had not seen 4, 5, or 6 of Star Wars. She hadn't seen any Star Wars. We started watching those after we got married. Okay. So we're talking about someone who does not care at all for Star Wars, loves that loves that show. So again, it's great watch. Now to the B-rated stuff. So on Netflix, I watched the Night Agent season 1. Whenever it first came out. And I'm someone who will tend to watch shows, like watch them over again when a new season's coming out. I did not do that for Night Agent 2. I actually really enjoy Night Agent 1, but not to the degree of rewatching. Night Agent 2, it's been okay so far. I think that they have kind of unfortunately tried to keep too much of the DNA from the first season, even when it doesn't work. So I'm not really going to recommend that one unless you just really enjoyed Night Agent 1 and just want some more Night Agent in your life. But I got to an episode where I just actually had to stop watching it because it was so immersive breaking for me that I just it was cringy to watch the episode, because the characters were just no longer acting in character anymore, and people were making unexplainably just stupid decisions. And I'm not trying to say stupid as in if I know how to do better in that situation, but it just for me, I just could not wrap my head around why they would make that choice. It was either just so blatantly stupid or contradictory to their character's nature that I couldn't. I was like, this seems totally contrived. You had to put it this way, but it's not. I don't see what it's doing for me as a viewer. Also, there's a lot more info dumping in this one, which I wasn't that happy for. I'm okay figuring things out. The story can tell itself. I don't need to be caught up on all the background of what's going on, because that can either be revealed later or it's probably not that important, which is kind of what's happened in this show so far. So I've not finished it. I'm in the middle of it. I actually had to stop and I just decided I would watch something else. So when I hit that episode and I stopped, the Recruit season 2 just came out, and I actually enjoyed season 1. I thought it was a good satire of these kind of shows. And so I was like, hey, I'm kind of getting tired of Night Agent. Let's watch the show that is the satire of this genre. And so far I've just watched a few episodes, but it's pretty consistent with how season 1 went. So I'm pretty happy for that. And so I'm excited to kind of see where it goes and if it can kind of maintain its humorous roots. And so far it's doing a good job. So if you enjoyed The Recruit season 1, then I would heavily recommend The Recruit season 2. It's just a good satire of spy shows. Not spy like James Bond, spy like Night Agent, spy like Jack Ryan. So just kind of a good satire of those. So it brings good humor while also having a good drama. It is certainly not an A-rated show. I would put it maybe as like a low B, but it's entertaining. So if you like shows like that, it's definitely an entertaining watch. With that, I think that covers all of the movies and TV shows. So let's jump into the third piece and the most exciting, games. So I know you all like board games. Let's start with that one. I've gotten to play several board games this week. A couple of new ones as well. Actually, a single new one. Sorry. So I got to play The Crew, the trick-taking game, for the first time. Now, for me, when we started, it's kind of weird because it's like, okay, I've never played a trick-taking game before, but I kind of have. So I've never played a trick-taking cooperative game, but I have played a lot of spades. Okay, and I know that spades is a classical playing card game, but it's a trick-taking game. I don't know how else to put it. And I played a lot of spades growing up because my family likes to play spades, especially my dad. So we played a lot of spades growing up. And so I was actually really excited to see how much of my spades knowledge kind of transferred into The Crew with this cooperative trick-taking game. So I was having an absolute blast. We were doing really good too until we just hit one particular scenario where all of the goals had to be completed by one person. So if you've never played The Crew before, I would heavily recommend playing a trick-taking game if you haven't played one before. You do kind of need, I would say, I think you need 4 people to make it good. I don't know that I would really like it at 3 or 2. Four for sure. So if you've not played one, like, get some friends together and go play one. It's definitely worth the experience, and it won't take much of your time. We played on TTS, which is even better because that means you can play for free to try it out. If you like it, go buy it. They're not expensive, so heavily recommend that. So again, we had a phenomenal time. It was super easy to learn the rules. Basically, we're playing a trick-taking game, and then there's just goals we have to complete, like, take a certain number of tricks, take a certain number of cards of a certain color, win a certain card with a certain number, that kind of thing. And you're either going to win or lose. You're going to win because you did it, or you're going to lose because you can't complete the goal. Like, one might say win 3 tricks and you can no longer win 3, right? So you lose. And again, you have to meet all of the goals. So if any one goal doesn't get met, that's it. So even if you have goals for yourself and you meet them, but somebody else at the table doesn't, it's a cooperative game. So everyone's on the same team. Everyone loses. You redo it. Okay. So that's basically how The Crew works. We did Deep Sea. And so it had that theme, which I thought was also really cool. Love that, especially since I've been playing Endeavor Deep Sea. So I'll transition that in a second. But just going to say that, again, as my first kind of maybe non-playing card trick-taking game, I thought The Crew was phenomenal. And I'm really excited to get to try out the Lord of the Rings one, hopefully next week. I really want to see what that one is like, or maybe a week after. But really excited to get to play that one sometime in the future. And again, if you've not played a trick-taking game, absolutely recommend The Crew. So again, Deep Sea, loving the theme. I've been playing Endeavor Deep Sea. I am currently working on Scenario 2. So the way I'm playing Endeavor Deep Sea right now, if you don't know what this game is, it's kind of like a cooperative tableau kind of worker placement game. Sort of not, though, because you don't have workers, but you are placing resources on the map. I absolutely love it. It's basically just like a big puzzle. I do not think true solo is the way to play. I've been playing by myself two-handed. I think that's the way to do it if you're going to play by yourself. I definitely, it's really, really good at 3 or just 2 if you have a buddy. 4 is too slow in my opinion, but 2 and 3 are just great. So what I've been trying to do is I've actually been trying to perfect that game. So it has 10 scenarios and there are 7 goals per scenario, and a perfect would mean you get 7 on each. So I got 7 on the first one after several tries, and now I'm trying to get 7 on the second one. I've currently done about 4 tries, I think, and I've not gotten it yet. So we're going to keep working on it. My closest attempt is about 5. And it is usually one of those where like you can easily get 4, but if you're going for 7, you might also just get like 2 because you have to hedge your bets so much. But I still really enjoy it, especially as like a puzzle game for what it is. Just trying to figure out how I can optimize my turns and hedge my bets. You definitely have to kind of play to your outs, and I actually really like that element of the game. At least when you're going for 7, you don't really have to hedge your bets when you're going for 4, but when you're going for a 7, you do, and I actually really like that. I like how it can kind of reward you for knowing what's possible in the game. Also, super love the deep sea theme, so if you like that as well, check it out. It's a phenomenal game. And then the last one, I got to, or not last one, last two, sorry. Spirit Island, got to play Spirit Island with Matt. We're currently doing this 120 scenario campaign. We'll probably do the first chapter, which is like 10 scenarios, but it's still been really cool. They basically kind of tell you what you're doing, and they've got modified, like they have additional rules per scenario. So it's kind of encouraging us to try new spirits, as well as to also play with kind of new rules to make the game fresh. I'm also relatively new to Spirit Island. I've only been playing it for now about 3 weeks. So it's been, for me, really great. I love getting to play it as it was as base, and now I love the challenge of kind of adapting to these new rules. And for Matt, who's a kind of a seasoned veteran at that game, it's giving him something new as well. Now, if you don't know what Spirit Island is, it's a cooperative game where you're trying to essentially beat the colonizers. And Matt actually has a solo challenge playthrough on the channel. So if you want to learn more about it, definitely go check that out. I think you'll find it to be a really, really neat game. So, and then lastly, I've been playing Dwarf Romantic with my wife. We're currently playing that together, doing the campaign. I actually have it behind me. We just finished a game before I started recording this. I'm recording this kind of Sunday night before the video comes out. So my wife, funny enough, not the biggest board game player, but there are games that she really, really enjoys that we play together quite often. And kind of funny enough, like not a big strategy enthusiast, but loves like midweight Euros and things like that. So it's kind of fun to play those with her. Actually, it's really fun to play those with her. But she's gotten really into Dwarf Romantic, which is awesome because I love this game. It's kind of just a tile placement game where you're just trying to line up different terrain types and kind of meet goals based on how many terrain types you have together. And so it's just like a fun cooperative puzzle. And we've been super enjoying it. We got our highest score yet today, 329 points. Low scores kind of start out around 100, 150, but as you play, you get to unlock more tiles. And then like very quickly, your scores will start ramping up. And so we've now unlocked all but one tile. And so I'm kind of excited to get that last tile and then to start get our scores even up to like 400. The score sheet goes up to 400. So after that, you're like, that's kind of like peak. If you can get above 400, that's really, really, really good. You're basically at a point where you've kind of perfected your playthrough of that game. So if you like tile placements or if you've never tried them, I think Dwarf Romantic is probably one of the best introductions to tile placement games. And it's kind of great for the whole family. And I'm actually just like personally really excited to see like when my kids get a little bit older and I can start playing this with them. Cause that's going to be so good. Just so good. So, lastly, we just got a few minutes here. So let's talk about video games. I've been playing a lot of video games this week. So I'm a habitual League of Legends player, but we don't need to talk about that. If you are as well, a lot of cool new content, that's been coming out. I've actually been really excited for it and enjoying it a lot. But the main thing I want to talk to you guys about is VR. So the last time Matt and I got together, he introduced me to VR. And so I have a Meta Quest 2 headset now, and we've been playing a lot of VR with Matt. So I only want to talk about the things we've been playing this week that are relatively new, which is Demeo, Beat Saber, Rumble, and Skyrim VR. Because I have like hundreds of hours of Skyrim, so I got to go play in VR as well. So let's talk about worst to best. Demeo is a tabletop, it's a VR tabletop game. Really hoping for it to be good. I know a lot of people like it, but I just did not. It reminded me of kind of a lightweight choose your own adventure, but kind of too light for my interests. So just I wasn't that excited. I love the interface. They smashed it like with the interface, and I want to see that with more games. But I don't see myself playing that one again. I mean, sorry. I mean, they put a lot of hard work into it. It's pretty, and I love the interface, but I just don't really see myself playing that one again. Next up from that, so we're going to go from like a D all the way up to like a high B, low A. Actually, really low A. So I would say Rumble is, let's put that at a high B. Yeah, let's put it high B. So Rumble is an earthbending game for exercise. It is really good. However, I think the movements have to be too precise, because you actually need your hand gesture and your placement to be exact. And I think it's too exact. So there's a lot of times where you're doing these gestures and then nothing happens. It also, there are certain movements that actually have to interact with things in the environment, and it doesn't say that. So it's not clear that that has to be the case. So I would like there to be more clarity in that game, and I'd like there to be a little bit more openness. It doesn't need to be as exact as it is, especially considering what the movements are. You're already having to like put your arms into very specific positions, so then having to like get it super exact and with the right finger like grips and stuff. I think that it could be a little bit looser and still be a great game. But otherwise, really enjoy that one. But I'm going to put that just at a high B because I think there needs to be more clarity there, but I could arguably be like one of the better fitness games, at least for me, because it's earthbending. I mean, come on. And so then after that, I would put it in A, like just a solid A would be Beat Saber. Got to play that today, and it's absolutely phenomenal. I've played Pistol Whip and Synth Riders, which I really enjoy both of those. I play those daily. And Beat Saber, I still could see myself playing that almost daily. That adds something. It's a rhythm game, but it adds something distinct from others in its category. I also don't know if it was like the first rhythm game, but it kind of feels like it. But yeah. So Beat Saber, super phenomenal rhythm game. Absolutely recommend it if you get a VR. And then lastly, of course, Skyrim VR. I went ahead and installed the FUS mod list, which has way too many mods, but that's okay. My PC can handle it, and I'm used to playing modded Skyrim, and I've got hundreds of hours. There are definitely some mods that you should get if you are going to play Skyrim VR. There's not many, so it wouldn't take you very long. Or you could just accept that Skyrim is going to be a 100 gigabyte game for you and go ahead and install FUS and just do their essentials list. So you only get the bare minimum that make the VR experience a good VR experience. You don't have to do all the extra stuff. And if you don't have a great PC, it will handle the essentials list. It doesn't do any of like the laws or parallax or 2K textures that would slow down the game or be too much for your PC. And if you're vanilla, then you don't have to do the gameplay mods either. That would significantly alter the game. But I don't need vanilla because I've played vanilla, and I do have a PC that can handle the appearance. So I have like 446 mods currently installed. Keep in mind, it's a mod list. So all I did was click a few buttons, and we're good to go. But it's really cool. I mean, it completely... It's like bringing back all the nostalgia of Skyrim for me. It is like, it takes it to a whole new level. I mean, I don't know if I can go back to non-Skyrim VR, like Skyrim non-VR. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. And I mean, my favorite like solo RPG for sure on like the MetaQuest. Yeah, there's just something about it. I mean, it's crazy to me how much I've played in mod Skyrim to have something that just like brings a whole new life to Skyrim. And what's crazy is that we're also about to get Sky Oblivion and all of the other regions of Skyrim. So that in VR, okay, getting to play Oblivion again in VR is going to be so good. So I'm pretty excited for that. And anyway, this video has already gone too long. So thank you. I talk forever. Thank you for bearing with me for a few extra minutes as we kind of go through this. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you guys are enjoying these hobbies and that you're participating in these hobbies as well. The last thing I want to leave you with, okay? If there's anything that we can be doing different or better, please let us know in the comments below. Also, if you have any suggestions for content that you would like to see, Matt and I are brainstorming a lot of different things that we could do, like the challenges that you guys saw last week. We're going to keep those going for a little while. But certainly if there are other things you'd like to see, we'd love to do it. We're also trying to figure out if there's a place for video game content on this channel. So if there's games that you think would be things that you'd watch, let us know, because it certainly helps us if we know that there's an audience. But other than that, like I said, just leave us some comments to let us know how we're doing and if there's anything that you'd like to see so we can try to accommodate that. But otherwise, just continue to have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week with our next Retch.